Welcome back to the Builders Bench. I'm Craig Larkins. The Canadian Construction Association has released its Construction Quarterly Economic Insights. While parts of the economy are still finding their footing, according to the report, construction is holding steady and in some areas pulling ahead. GDP is up, and Budget 2025 is putting real dollars on the table for infrastructure, housing, and major projects. At the same time, permits have dipped, costs remain elevated, and labor is back in the spotlight. So what does this mean for builders, contractors, and construction leaders as we head into 2026? Joining me on the bench today is Louis-Philippe Champagne, Associate Vice President of Public Affairs and Industry Practices at the Canadian Construction Association. LP, welcome to the bench. So the report covers a lot of ground here, LP. When you take a step back, what would you say are the key takeaways from the report?
Well, there's a lot in there. It's one of our busiest report, I would say, in recent quarters. And the main reason for that, it's the first report where we have a significant amount of data on the impact of the trade tension with the U.S. We've had a few quarters now of data and collection on the response to tariff and counter-tariff. So it's a jam-packed report, and it's also the first report since the federal budget. So a good reading, if I can say so. We're going to have a look at it. The key takeaway are quite simple. The construction industry has outpaced the all-industry average in terms of growth. So this is a very good news for construction. We had some concern last quarter. There was a significant dip across many regions, mostly due to multi-residential, specifically in Toronto, but also to an extent in Vancouver and other big cities. This hasn't fully corrected. There's still some challenges for housing start in residential construction, but the governmental investment and the commercial sector have really pushed the industry forward in Q3 and 4. So we're quite excited to see what's happening at that level. So growth is positive. On the downside, another important takeaway is the cost of construction, which remain one of the top issue for our industry, something we work diligently on. If you are tracking indices that we have in the report, the BCPI, the Building Construction Price Index, track the inflation of material across different divisions. And what we've been seeing since COVID, and especially now with the trade dispute, is price of key material that are essential for construction have been growing vastly beyond inflation. Most notably, the price of steel fabrication, steel structure have been going up due to the counter-tariff and protectionist policy that we've seen. So this is a challenge for contractor, but especially for owners who see the price of their project, be it civil infrastructure or residential or commercial, increasing in price as the price of goods goes up as well. Those are the main takeaways.
So you had mentioned there's a lot of information, a lot of topics that directly impact industry. And I did save this question for later, but let's just get into it. Tariffs. Is this becoming the new norm for our country, the industry?
This is honestly a very complex geopolitical questions. And I wouldn't dare to say that I have any kind of inside knowledge of what's being discussed in Ottawa. This is something of very high priority for the Prime Minister's office and key ministers in the cabinet. I'm confident that they do their very best to making sure to protect Canadians' interest. It does come with consequences. You can't make public policy that relates to trade and supply chain without picking winners and losers in some way. There's no gold ticket there. And what we've seen in the past year is public policy put in place to protect very specific industry, specific region, most notably the steel sector that's have seen some remission process, some counter-tariff to protect their own market at the expense of other industry. And unfortunately, construction has been one of the industries suffering from the counter-tariff. The goods that we procure as a domestic industry to build have been costing more. On one side because of tariff, on the second side because of the inflation measure caused by the artificial force of market. To your question, is this the new normal? The fact is nobody knows, right? I've heard a lot of people saying we need to get used to it as the way it's going to be. We've heard the Prime Minister in Davos saying, we need to stop mourning the way the world was. And I think he's right to an extent. I will say, however, that I don't think what we live today is there to stay as it is. I believe a lot of the dynamic of last year are a direct correlation to the U.S. administration, which will not be there forever. We are approaching the midterms, which will most likely have an impact on how much power and capacity they have to change things if they lose the House and the Senate but more importantly, I don't think this is a sustainable position for Donald Trump and his administration. The U.S. people are starting to suffer the impact of tariff in the U.S. They are seeing a lot of manufacturing moving outside the U.S. to circumvent the tariff, some of them to Canada, which we're happy to welcome, some of them to Latin America. I don't think this is a sustainable reality. I don't think it's a new normal. I always believe, and I really hope I'm right on this one, that most of what we've seen last year is posturing from Donald Trump to prepare himself for a deal in the CUSMA negotiation. We've seen him do that before, saying, I'm going to play hard until we go to negotiation table, and then I'm going to reap the reward of that. So there is a scenario, which I hope is true, where things could ease dramatically post-CUSMA negotiation in the mid-2026. Let's have finger crossed.
And I think people forget at the end of the day, businessman before he was a president. So like you're right, that posturing of setting up himself. So last night, actually, the VRCA had our AGM. Lots of members were talking about the federal budget, as does the report. I guess the main question a lot of people were having, we were offered billions in spending for infrastructure right across the country. We have a municipal election coming up. When do we start to see the shovels in the ground, in your opinion? What's the typical scenario in these situations?
That's the question. Everybody want to know about it. I'll be honest here. So when we look at the federal budget, be it in our economic report or media coverage, people look at the big numbers, right? $280 billion in capital investment, $115 billion in infrastructure. Those are massive investment, and we welcome them as an industry. But the reality of it doesn't all come January 1st. This is investment that were planned over a long period, in some case 10 years, in some case 5 years, and will take some time to be allocated, both in terms of how it's spread out, but also in terms of procurement and rollout. There are some branches of government and some programs that are much more efficient in getting the money down from Ottawa into the actual job site. I'll give you a key example is national defense. It's a very unique sector. They have unique power and agencies to do that kind of thing. And we've seen, if you think back in the spring 2025, Prime Minister is saying, we're going to meet our NATO commitment. Money is going into national defense, both in terms of traditional procurement for vehicles and airplanes and weapons, but also for construction project. This has already started rolling out. We've seen a great announcement from DCC in partnership with CCA in the fall. We've looked at the whole pipeline of project for years to come. So they are ready to go, and they're already investing in region and bases. On the flip side of that, you've also have programs that are brand new that need to be fully announced yet. We've had some part of the announcement in budget, but not all the details. It's true for the new trade infrastructure plan that was announced in budget 2025. We know very little about this at this point, but also items like the Build Community Strong Fund, which is the Government of Canada's decision to invest in the country across provinces and territories to support municipal infrastructure. This need a full design at the policy level. What are the buckets, the silos, call that whatever you want, the point system to decide which project received the funding, and then a whole lot of discussion in negotiation with provinces and municipalities. So this will certainly take some time to actually see the value in the job sites.
I always like to say politics is a long game, and so is the funding that they tend to announce at every level. When we're looking at funding from the federal side of things, there was a mention of apprenticeship programming and investment in the trades. Any movement, any rumblings around that coming as we look into 2026?
Yeah, unfortunately, not enough. You're correct to point out that one of the key challenges for the industry is our workforce shortage. We've been focusing a lot on the supply chain in the last few months because of how significant the change with the U.S. have been. But the reality is that the shortage we've been facing for several decades now is still very much true. The crisis of 2022, where all industry were in a shortage situation, has resolved for the most part. So if you look at economy-wide, the shortage is much better. Unemployment is up, which is okay to a level, but you need to keep that under control. If you look at construction specifically, we are still by far the most impacted sector when it comes to vacancies. Canada-wide, we're talking about 40,000 jobs currently open on job site, not projected for 34 or in the future. We're talking about jobs that are open today that are slowing down process for construction. When we hear the federal government and provincial governments as well saying we want to invest in construction, we want to build more homes, then the question remains, who's going to build it? Because the Prime Minister will not take a hammer and come build home in Vancouver. So we need the workforce. We need to train that workforce, welcome them in our industry, and find a way to expand that number. What have been done in Ottawa is a step in the right direction. We've seen it in Budget 2025, the desire to invest directly in skill training. This is good. The problem we're facing is a certain misunderstanding from government of how construction work. There's 1.6 million construction workers in Canada. It's a massive industry. 1 in 12 Canadian effectively work directly in construction. Only a subset of that are unionized, about 30% nationwide, much less in Alberta and the prairies, much more in Quebec. The funding we've seen so far in UTIP, the Union Trade Incentive Program, is directly targeted to unionized worker, leaving behind 1.1 million workers that don't get access to that kind of funding. So we need to think behind these programs and say, sure, fund the unions. They are important entity. They have ways to really impact the market of labor. But then what do we do for the rest? What do we do for trade school, colleges that provide these programs? What do we do for open shop contractor when they need that kind of support? This remains to be seen.
A report full of information. You can find it on the CCA's website. I'd highly recommend giving it a read. LP, one more final question. Looking ahead to 2026, in addition to everything that we just talked about, what's CCCA focused on? What are you most focused on? What's in store over the next couple months for the first quarter of 2026?
There's a lot that we're looking at, and we're quite eager to get to work with the government on our Meech Lake meeting coming up in a few months, our annual convention, and of course our Hill Day in the fall, which will be a big one again. There's a few things that are top of mind that contractors should know about. One that we haven't discussed yet is the Buy Canadian policy. So part of the government's response to the trade dispute has been beyond the counter tariff on specific product, putting in place a federal policy where federal projects are required within specific guidance to source material in Canada, which is good for the manufacturing sector, which is an important policy to promote our own economy, but will create some challenges for contractors that need to build these projects. CCA have been well involved in the development of this policy over the fall, and we believe we found a nice balance between limiting impact but making sure we promote our own domestic supply. But we should expect some transformation of the supply chain as it relates to that. So I recommend contractors to go read on the government website about the Buy Canadian policy, especially if they plan to bid on federal project, and better understand what it means to them on the day-to-day. It's going to be a big file for CCA between now and the start of Q2.
One more question, actually. Given the current climate in Ottawa, Pierre Poilievre just had his leadership. He was 80% support by the party. There's still talk of minority, majority. We talked about this last night at the AGM. In your opinion, where does that all stand?
Great question. Politically, we are in a unique place in Ottawa. Pierre Poilievre is here to stay. We know that now. There was a lot of doubt over the last few months. We've seen two members of parliament crossing the floor from the Conservative to Liberal, getting the Liberal very close to majority. We see the Prime Minister polling being very positive, mostly in reaction to his role on the international stage. Number right after the Davos speech were actually quite high. This could put us in a let's call it precarious electoral situation where the Prime Minister may choose to launch an election early to go secure majority government. This would be a smart political decision, one that would cost taxpayer significantly, but one that he may choose to do. If not, then the question is what comes next? The NDP is in their own leadership race. They'll need to decide what the fate of the party and the leadership is. And then the question is, will we see more floor crossing? Will we see changes in by-election that will potentially lead Carney into a majority or lead the government to fall in a few years and go back into an election again? So there is a lot of uncertainty for the business sector, both in terms of the trade dispute in the U.S., but also in terms of Canadian politics, where there's a lot of unknowns on the table.
Good to know. Any final remarks?
I'm just really looking forward to a great year for construction. As much as we had some concern in the tail end of 2025, I think things are looking up for construction, both in terms of investment, of the work we can do to address the labor shortage, and we should have a few good years ahead. So I'm really excited to work with contractors across Canada to make this happen.
It's so nice to see that hyper-focus continues on construction. And again, we're heading into a municipal election year, LP, so the VRC has lots planned as far as, you guys had the CCA had the Construction for Canadians campaign. We're going to be launching something very similar for here, specifically for the Lower Mainland. So more details on that coming up, of course, in the near future. You can find past episodes of The Builder's Bench on VRCA's website. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and invite your friends and colleagues to take a seat on the bench with us. LP, thank you so much for taking a seat on the bench with me today. I'm Craig Larkins, and this is The Builder's Bench.